This is Caitlin, your host of the No Sleep for Dramas podcast, where we get no sleep and survive on coffee to watch just one more episode at night. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the No Sleep for Dramas podcast. I am your host, Caitlin, and as you can see from the title, this week's episode is all about Studio Ghibli. Now, I have been wanting to do this for a while. I have been a long fan of Studio Ghibli movies, and I knew for certain that I have not watched every single one out there, so I thought, why not challenge myself? I want to watch every Studio Ghibli movie in chronological order for when it was released, and then I'm gonna do some podcast episodes about them. Once I get 4 or 5 movies finished, it will be a podcast episode. Maybe I'll do solo episodes like this one today, or maybe I'll have a guest on eventually. We'll have to wait and see. I would want to get this all done in 2025, but I honestly just don't think that's possible at this point with what I have planned for the podcast. But I plan to at least have a couple of these episodes out in the year 2025 and then finish it up in 2026 because ultimately I do want to watch all of the Studio Ghibli movies. And then at the end, once I have all of my reviews out and I've watched all the movies, I will be releasing an episode of me ranking all of them, which will be, I think, hard because I definitely have watched some of these movies and I definitely have favorites of those that I've watched. And I know I'll probably be rating them all pretty high, at least my favorites. I'm going to try and challenge myself to actually rank them and not just, oh my God, I can't choose, so they're both tied. I really, really want to try and rank them. That's the plan. You're going to get reviews about Studio Ghibli, and then you're going to get a ranking episode at the very end. We'll see how this goes, but that will probably bleed into 2026. At this point, you'll definitely get at least 2 episodes, if not 3 episodes this year about Studio Ghibli's. Please write in the comments or message me if you are a fan of Studio Ghibli movies. Also, I have always said Studio Ghibli, and that's how I've heard it. I apologize if I'm actually mispronouncing Ghibli. I've always heard it pronounced that way. In advance, I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but that is how I've always been around people pronouncing that. That's how they've pronounced it around me. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that, by the way, if I am if I am mispronouncing that. I have finished the first 5 movies in chronological order. This episode is going to be my mini reviews, and I actually was surprised I did not like all of these movies. I went in thinking like, oh, it's Studio Ghibli. I'm going to rank them all high. They're all going to be fantastic. Absolutely not. Because I'm kind of walking in this blind, I did not read synopses before starting these movies. I just got a list of chronological order and I clicked play on the first 5 because I wanted to go in this with as little knowledge as possible to not, like, for example, if I had known one of these movies was a slice of life movie, I would have gone into the movie being like, I'm going to hate this movie because I know slice of life is not my favorite. I tried to go into these as blind as possible. Granted, I have seen some of these movies, and those are all newer movies. I know, for example, Ponyo, I've rewatched Ponyo, I don't even know how many times, and I own it on DVD. I know I'm probably going to love that movie. Granted, I have not seen that movie in years. Maybe my feelings about that movie has changed in the last, I don't know, 10 years. I think it's been at least 5 to 7 years, maybe 10 since I've watched that movie. I tried to go into these movies as blind as possible so I can give an objective review, but also not have a bias assumption before I clicked play on these movies. As I said, for example, slice of life. I know that's not my favorite thing, so I probably would have had a biased assumption that I would have hated the movie if I had known it was a slice of life movie, you know? And as I said, first 5 movies in this episode I had never seen before. We are on an even playing field for this first episode. With all of the 5 Studio Ghibli movies, I will go through the synopsis, I will say the year they were made, and then I will give my mini review, and then lastly, I'll give my ratings, not rankings, ratings. The first one I'm going to talk about is Only Yesterday. It's was made in 1991, and I got all of these synopses off of My Anime List. Yes, there is a My Drama list, and then there's a My Anime list. I have no idea if they're run by the same people. Interface-wise, I like My Drama List better, but if you're looking for a website sort of like My Drama List for all your anime, you can watch myanimelist.net. That's what I use. You can also go to my blog and follow along. I wrote a blog post for all of my podcast notes and reviews for this episode. You can go and follow along and get links to all of these movies on myanimelist.net per my blog post, which is posted now as this episode came out. Only Yesterday was made in 1999 and came out in 1999. The synopsis of this from My Anime List is, and I apologize if I butcher any of these Japanese names. Taiko Okajima is a 27-year-old independent woman who spent her entire life in Tokyo. Looking to unwind from the rush of the big city, she decides to visit her family in the country to help out during the harvest. On the train there, Taiko vividly recalls her memories of a schoolgirl in the initial stages of puberty, as if she is on a trip with her childhood self. A young farmer named Toshio picks her up at the station and they quickly develop a friendship. During her stay, Taiko forms strong bonds with family and friends, learning the contrasts between urban and rural life, as well as the struggles and joys of farming. Nostalgic and bittersweet, this movie takes on Taiko's journey as an adult woman coming to terms with her childhood dreams compared to the person she is today. And I would say that synopsis pretty much sums up the movie really, really well. You do have an adult woman who is on this trip to the countryside and is constantly thinking of her childhood. And you see that play out on screen when these childhood memories come up. You actually see her as a child play out the scenes out in her memories on screen. So, what is my mini review of this? I would say this movie is a mixed bag for me. It maybe wasn't made for me either because this movie is clearly a slice of life story. And as I said in my intro, the slice of life story just isn't my thing. I grow really bored of them pretty easily, especially if the slice of life is slow moving and if I'm not really invested in the characters. And this was slow moving. It's about a woman in the countryside. And you know, you leave Tokyo, you leave the busy life of Tokyo and the career grind of Tokyo to go out in the countryside to relax and to enjoy the nature out there. Obviously, this story is going to be a little more slow moving because this woman went to the countryside to relax and then hang out in the farm fields and with nature. This story just moved too slowly for me to enjoy it to the best of its abilities. That being said, I still found some nice things about this movie I did like. The movie is about a woman, as I said, reminiscing about her childhood as she goes to this countryside. There's a lot of nostalgia in this movie, which causes the audience to have nostalgia about their own childhoods. I found that I started reminiscing about my own childhood of like, would I have liked to go to the countryside? In Wisconsin, where I grew up, the countryside was going up north to a cabin and spending weekends there fishing, swimming, maybe skiing or snowshoeing in the winter, drinking hot cocoa by the fire, camping. You know, that was my childhood in Wisconsin. This was just this woman was going into the countryside and farming and picking vegetables in the summer of her childhood. So I found that I was sort of comparing some things I did as my within my childhood to the woman and seeing if it somewhat had parallels, even though most of my memories were winter memories, especially in terms of going to quote unquote the countryside. For me, there was a lot of nostalgia in this, which I enjoyed. As well, the animation really stood out in this film for me. The film animated scenes differently depending on if it was a memory from her childhood or the present day for when she was working in the fields. The scenes when she was a child were lighter in terms of coloring. It seemed lighter, it seemed brighter, it seemed not as dark. There was all that white coming through the animation. Also, it seemed unfinished. It seemed like the animator didn't quite finish drawing the scenes that her childhood was playing out on screen. I took that as maybe it was a girl trying to figure out her life and wasn't 100% sure about her future and still figuring herself out. I think that was my interpretation of those childhood memories and the animation that fit that. And then you have that contrasted with the animation when she was adult, which is a lot more defined and a lot crisper and had coloring that was perceived to be darker compared to the children's memory scenes. Also, there was very seamless transitions between the child and adult scenes, which I thought was very well done because it gave me the idea of if she saw something in the countryside, it would trigger a memory and then it would seamlessly move into this memory and the animation would just get lighter. And I thought that was very well done and it didn't take me out of the story or the movie by doing that. An interesting topic that was brought up in the movie was organic farming, and it stood out to me because this movie is from 1991, 1992, and so watching this movie now in 2025 about a topic that was kind of up and coming in the 90s was sort of a time warp because in 2025, organic farming and eating organically is kind of the norm. Like, I wouldn't say it's the norm, but it's more understood, there's more research about it, there's more ideas about it, there's more everything about it, and I think in the '90s, it was kind of a newer idea that people were still trying to figure out and if it was a good idea. That was an interesting topic for me to watch in a Studio Ghibli movie in 2025 because the movie was clearly advocating for organic farming and it was spilling out facts and things like that. That was an interesting thing for me to look back on and watch while this movie played out. Another thing that stood out for this movie for me is the music. At one point in the movie, the main woman was picked up by a man, as I said in the synopsis, from the train station. And in the car, he's listening to some music and she asks him what they are or who they are. And he responds, it's a Hungarian band. And then the film proceeds to use this music as well as other music that sort of matches that same theme throughout the movie, especially when they're in the countryside. I did like Shazam, another song, when they were watching a sunrise on the fields and it said it was a Bulgarian band. I thought that was really interesting and unique to use Eastern European music contrasting with characters who were working in the Japanese countryside and speaking Japanese to each other while this music was playing. And there was some singing in this music. You had Japanese characters talking to each other in Japanese when you're hearing Eastern European languages in the background. I also thought the music fit the film very well, especially with the background of a field and farming. Somehow that worked together. The music worked out really well, and I did like that. Overall, I would say my rating of this is a 7 out of 10. Again, I don't think the slice of life is really for me. The story was slower, which again could work for me, but most of the time does not. But I did like that it brought up some interesting topics, and I thought the animation was beautiful and it was seamless from child to adult. 7 out of 10. And I would recommend if you like a slice of life story, I would definitely check this one out. All right, next movie I watched was Porco Rosso. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but that's my pronunciation of the title. It came out in 1992. The synopsis of this movie, per myanimelist.net, says after a curse turned him into a pig, World War I ace Marco Pago becomes Porco Rosso, a mysterious bounty hunter who takes down sky pirates in the Adriatic Sea. He whiles away his days in a secluded island, rarely leaving other than to collect bounties or to visit the beautiful Gina, a songstress and owner of the Hotel Adriano. One day, while traveling to fix his faulty engine, Porco Rosso is gunned down by a young American hotshot named Donald Curtis. Thrilled at the possibility of fame, Donald boldly declares that the flying pig is dead. Not wanting to disappoint Gina, Porco Rosso flees to the famous Piccolo SPA airplane company and takes out a massive loan to repair and improve his fighter plane. There, he's surprised to find the chief engineer of Piccolo SPA is the 17-year-old Fio Piccolo. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any of these, who hungers for a chance to prove herself. With Fio's improvements, Porco Rosso prepares to challenge Donald officially and regain his honor. So I do agree with this synopsis. That does happen in the movie, but I think a major thing that sort of happens in the movie that is not touched upon is the themes that come out of this movie. I'll talk about that in my mini review, but I wish they had named something and that talks about the aftermath of war. What can happen to somebody with war? I did not think I would love this film as much as I did. I definitely like this one better than Only Yesterday. And I think I liked it more because it addressed heavier topics, such as I said, death, war, survivor's guilt. It still had comedy, which was interesting because the contrast was very drastic, where you had dark topics being done. Then you have these comedic scenes of these people who are making fun of each other, kind of like a slapstick comedy in a way, which kind of reminded me of those old cartoons, like the Popeye cartoons, where they kind of beat each other up in a comedic sort of way. And you got that in this movie. So to have that contrast was really interesting to me. I think I like this more because of those heavier topics and that contrast. Now, this is just me, and maybe it's because they're flying around Italy or something, which I don't know why, because the detective's Belgian, but for some reason, Porco Rosso, the pig, reminded me a lot of the Belgian detective Perot. Maybe it probably was his appearance. He has a huge mustache and he's wearing a trench coat a lot of the time. But for some reason, I kept thinking, man, that guy looks like Perot. That's just a little fun fact about me. I thought this film stood out in the animation style and tone compared to some of the other Studio Ghibli films because it was a lot more serious, and I was not expecting that. It still had some whimsy to them, but compared to things like Howl's Moving Castle or Kiki's Delivery Service, this had a lot less whimsy, which was, again, interesting because it didn't have no whimsy. It had comedy and sort of a slapstick comedies. That contrast just is really interesting for me to watch play out on screen because even in the comedy, it had a more serious undertone because it was about a guy who was a bounty hunter fighting these jets in the air while rescuing people and maneuvering in wartime planes. I thought that contrast was really defining for this movie, and it definitely was interesting to watch from my perspective in the US in 2025, because another thing that this film does is it criticizes fascism in Italy after World War I. And if you know where we are in politics right now in the US, I was just like, this is interesting to be watching at this time period. I did love the female empowerment in this film. You got Gina, and then you also have Fio. Fio is a 17-year-old girl. Gina is a woman who's a songstress, but you can tell that she did some things during the war. She probably spied for people. She watched people die around her. She's a strong woman who doesn't take anything from anybody else. And then Fio has this kind of personality that draws people to her. She's very energetic and she is loud and she's unapologetic and she's a mechanic. And so she's a woman working in a like an airplane company um in a man's field. And what's cool about this, again, speaking of the female empowerment, there was a scene where Porco Rosso goes and takes his plane and has it repaired at this company. And the man who runs the company is a man. And so they're starting out repairing his plane, and everybody walking in to repair his plane is a woman. And it just shows that during the war, women took up these jobs that the men had to do or were supposed to be doing while they were at war. And either the men died and they had to keep doing those jobs, or eventually they had to give up those jobs and go back into the home in World War I when the men came back. And so to see that really powerful scene of just a bunch of women, wives, daughters, neighbors, all relatives and friends of this two people who ran this plane company who improved and built this plane as if they'd been doing it for 25 years with all of the tools and all of everything was just a very powerful scene when it came to female empowerment and what they are perceived to be able to do to what they actually can do. So all the female characters in this were fantastic. I love that a lot. There was also some great quotable lines in this movie. I don't think I'll ever forget this line. I'd rather be a pig than a fascist, quote unquote. I love that line. The minute it was said, I had to rewind it to make sure that I didn't read that incorrectly because I was watching it in Japanese audio, and so I was like, "Oh, that's fantastic." I loved some of the lines in this movie. I will say one of the things that I'm still a little confused about this, which is why it's somewhat downrated, is I'm still unsure 100% why the main character was portrayed as a pig for the movie. My theory is because of survivor's guilt, because as you watch the movie and you learn about him as a character, you realize that he went through a lot of things in the war and he probably has survivor's guilt. I don't know if that's really ultimately explained or even that if that is the right theory, but that's the theory I had going on with it. So I would have liked that to be a little better explained. I also thought the movie could have had a stronger ending. It didn't have the worst ending in the world. I just wanted more of a love story between Porco and Gina because I thought they were great together. But maybe it also, the ending kind of reminded me of Casablanca at the same time. So maybe it was fitting that they got the ending they did because Porco really could have been the man from Casablanca as well. Either way, I was impressed by this film. I enjoyed it a lot more than I assumed I would. And so I gave it a 9 out of 10, and that was Porco Rosso from 1992. The third movie I'm going to talk about is Ocean Waves. Came out in 1993, and the synopsis here is in the city of Kauchi, high school student Taku Morisaki is going about his work when his friend Yutaka Matsuno calls and asks him to get to their school as soon as possible. Taku arrives and Matsuno introduces him to Rikako Muto, a beautiful girl from Tokyo who recently transferred to their school. Although Rikako is academically and athletically gifted, her generally unpleasant attitude leaves her with virtually no friends outside of Matsuno and another girl from her class. After a chance encounter during their class trip, Taku suddenly finds himself more involved in Rakako's personal life, much to Matsuno's dismay. Struggling to balance his friendship with Matsuno and his own budding infatuation for Rikako, Taku must come to terms with his feelings and understand how a girl with a troubled past is having such a massive effect on his life. And again, that synopsis is from myanimelist.net. All right, I'm going to be frank with you guys. I did not like this movie, so this is probably going to be a very, very short review. I did not like this movie for one main reason. I did not like it for the female lead at all. I thought she took advantage of the male lead, basically took advantage of everybody in this movie and tried to manipulate all of the characters. And yeah, it was revealed in the movie that she had a rough life, but I honestly could not feel sorry for her. She was just so horrible to me, and she for me made no progression or very little progression from the beginning to the end of the movie in terms of the story. And so that is the main reason why I did not like this film. I was like, why is this guy so hung up on her and why are these two friends fighting over her? And they're really not fighting in hindsight, but it did cause a rift between them, and I just could not understand how these two guys or anybody for that matter, other than the fact that she was pretty and athletic, could be like head over heels for this woman because she was horrible. She just was absolutely horrible to these guys. There was like some scenes in the movie where she slapped Taku, I think that was his name, Taku, yeah, the main guy. He slapped her back and then he punches Matsuno. And for me, those slaps, especially to her, made no sense, but also was satisfying because she needed to get slapped. Like him getting slapped back and him getting punched by Matsuno and him punching Matsuno back, like none of that made sense to me because this woman was so horrible. I did not like her character at all. And also, there was no communication in the film. It would have been nice. Like, I actually was looking forward to this sweet romance play out in this film, or at least I wanted to see this romance that I was expecting to play out. And I feel like if there was more communication and if the female lead wasn't so manipulative and just told the truth, the romance could have happened. But because the female lead was so manipulative and horrible, when you got to the end of the film and the feelings were confessed, both when they were younger in high school and then when they were at their high school reunion, because this movie was like again one of those kind of reminiscing about first loves movies, because the movie started out as a high school reunion as an adult, and then he reminisced about her for most of the movie in high school, and you learned about their past and how they got to know each other, and then by the end they met up again, and you had this confession, this love confession, and it did not make sense to me at all. I'm like, okay, you confessed to her when you were in high school, you got rejected, or you wanted to, but then you didn't. So then you wait until your high school reunion when you come across her again and you confess and you think that they each other have developed feelings and you haven't talked to her since high school. It didn't make sense. The timeline just did not make sense. And I just didn't see how this person could be falling in love with this woman when she was so horrible to them. And he was such a nice guy. That's the thing. He was a nice guy, and she just took advantage of that. I did not like her at all. And also, there was really no buildup to the feelings. It kind of just happened. The confession scenes kind of just happened. I was like, this could have been done so much differently and would have had a better payoff. But mainly, I just did not like the female lead. Also, it's a slice of life again. That probably wasn't doing me any favors. It is the shortest of the films I watched. I think it was like an hour and 15 minutes compared to hour and a half, 2 hour length. But even in the hour 15 minute, I felt it dragged so much, mainly due to the fact I did not like the female lead. The animation was old school, but I thought it fit the story because he was reminiscing about his high school years. So the animation looking older fit what was going on in the story. But overall, I did not like this film. So I gave it a 3 out of 10 because I did think the animation was cool. I did like the Taku guy, the main guy. And even Matsuno, I liked him, but he also wasn't as prominent of a character as I thought he would be because it was mainly the girl I did not like in Taku for most of it. Overall, my rating for Ocean Waves is a 3 out of 10 because I wanted to finish it because one, it was so short, and two, I wanted to see if I actually was going to like it at the end, but I would not rewatch this at all. That was Ocean Waves. I gave it a 3 out of 10. Second to last film I watched was Pom Poko. It came out in 1994. The synopsis from myanimelist.net is: with the increasing need for Tokyo to expand as one of Japan's major cities, inevitable sacrifices must be made so that changes can take place. One of these sacrifices is that the room for nature and wildlife to flourish will decrease significantly. As this decline continues, many animal communities experience the brunt of urbanization. One such community, known as the tanuki, a magical type of shape-shifting mammal, is caught up in the struggle to defend their beloved forest from being absorbed by the looming threat of expanding Tokyo. As more and more tanuki find themselves with nowhere to hide and territorial fights become increasingly regular amongst the different factions, the elder tanuki decides that something must be done. For the sake of their home as well as the safety of their future generations, the Tanuki unite as one with the hope that together they might be able to repel mankind's construction projects and scare them away from the forests. But as they begin their first attempts of sabotage, the Tanuki soon realize that the operation will be no easy task. Will they reclaim their forest as a united community, or will they be torn apart by a war against humanity? Again, that was synopsis by myanimelist.net. My mini review of this, again, I walked into this movie thinking it was going to be a cute movie, and it ended up having a much deeper message and it had a lot more emotion to it than I anticipated. It had a much darker message than I assumed it would. When you have a movie about cute animals in it, you immediately think it's going to be a lighter topic in the movie, and the message of this movie really was an environmental one. I mean, as the synopsis says, it was about these tanuki who were dealing with the encroachment of Tokyo into their mountainside and into their fields, taking away food sources and places to live and to raise their family and their clan, and basically places to survive. It criticizes the humans destroying land and forests to build cities and kicking animals out of these territories, thus the environmental message. Apparently, through research, I found out this movie is actually based on an actual Tokyo suburb being built. Apparently, it was a big deal to have this particular suburb built, and it took a long time due to various reasons. That actual suburb was used as a backdrop for this criticism in the movie and this environmental message that was portrayed in this movie. Now, I assumed, and which I'm assuming among a lot of people who have watched this movie, I assumed the animals in the film were just raccoons because they looked like raccoons. But as you can tell from the synopsis and from my research, they're actually tanuki, which is a magical shape-shifting mammal from the folklore in Japan. Tanuki is an actual animal in Japan, but it also had some folklore and mythology behind them too. The actual animal, I think, comes out as like raccoon dog. I think that's the English name of it. And they literally look like raccoon dogs. Apparently, according to my research, the mythical beings could shapeshift into other things and people, just like they do in the film. One part of the film I did not like, mainly because I didn't know it was going to happen, and I didn't quite understand what was happening because I hadn't done my research yet on what these animals were, this tanuki mythical creatures were. And I honestly don't think this was needed, but I understand why it was needed because of the folklore. So a couple times in the film, while the tanuki are either fighting the humans or just hanging out themselves, they're shapeshifters, right? They can shapeshift into pretty much anything, and it's not their entire body. They can shapeshift their arm, they can shapeshift their head, they can shapeshift their tail. So there were multiple scenes in this film where they transformed their genitalia, and that was it. Only their genitalia. Like at one point, there was a scene where one of the older people had made like a rug out of his genitalia, and the other raccoons were laying on it, not knowing that it was his genitalia until he told them. And I was watching this scene and I'm like, why? Like, what was the reason behind that scene? And then I looked into what tanuki actually were, and then it kind of made a little more sense to me because apparently, according to my research, when I further looked into it, sometimes the tanuki are associated with fertility and good luck. So when you see statues of the tanuki in Japan, they do have large genitalia sometimes on these statues. So it made more sense when I did my research, but at the time when I was watching this, I was like, that's so strange. And it wasn't the only time it happened. There was a scene where these tanuki were fighting the humans and they were basically expanding their genitalia to create balloons as they flew through the air and like kind of like parachutes. And I just, again, it was just so weird to me because it was unexpected and I didn't understand what was going on until I did further research. I still kind of find it strange. It was a very unexpected part of this movie that I was not ready for. But also, it was interesting for me to look into it and research more because I do love researching about folklore and mythology. And I didn't realize that tanuki even was a thing in Japan. Anything else I want to say about this movie? Again, I didn't really think the whole genitalian scenes needed to happen. I think they could have done that differently. But again, I understand why it happened. I also thought the animation style was the classic Studio Ghibli, which was fun to watch, and it also suited the film quite well. I love the found family because, as I said in the synopsis, these tanuki were in separate clans, but eventually had to band together and live together. So it was a favorite trope of mine, found family. And it also had a more somber tone to this film because eventually the tanuki had to make a decision. Were they going to die out or were they going to move? Were they going to join society and try to survive in this expanding city of Tokyo? What were they going to do? And it was heartbreaking for me to like watch them try and deal with this dilemma because essentially they were saying, oh, I have to go live on my own to some extent. And when you live in a clan, that can be lonely. So it had a more somber tone with that. And of course, there was death with the environmental stuff. I did appreciate that though. I thought that gave the environmental message of this movie a lot more impact with the somber tone. I rate this a 9 out of 10 as well, even though I did not like the genitalia part of this. I thought it was well done, and I thought the message was very clear through it. And found family, as I said, is one of my favorite tropes, so I'm giving Pompoko a 9 out of 10. And lastly, the last movie I'm going to review is Whispers of the Heart. Came out in 1995. Synopsis is Shizuko Tsukishima, sorry if I butcher that name, is an energetic 14-year-old girl who enjoys reading and writing poetry in her free time. Glancing at the checkout cards of her books one evening, she notices that her library books are frequently checked out by a boy named Seiji Amasawa. Curiosity strikes Shizuku, and she decides to search for the boy who shares her love for literature. Meeting a peculiar cat on the train, Shizuku follows the animal and eventually is led to a quaint antique shop where she learns about a cat statuette known as the Baron. Taking an interest in the shop, she surprisingly finds that Seiji, and the two quickly befriend one another. Shizuku learns while acquainting herself with Seiji that he has a dream that he would like to fulfill, causing her dismay that she remains uncertain of her future and has yet to recognize her talents. However, as her relationship with Saiji grows, Suzuku becomes determined to work toward a goal. Guided by the whispers of her heart and inspiration from the Baron, she resolves to carve out her own potential and dreams. And again, that synopsis is from myanimelist.net. My final review for this is I enjoyed this one quite a bit, and I was really surprised I did, because again, this is another slice of life movie, but I think what helped is it has this sort of magical whimsy element to it, which made it a little different than just your normal slice of life story. And it's a coming of age that was more for me, and I just enjoyed this story a lot more compared to some of the other movies I watched in this episode. And I love that it had more magic and more whimsy to it. It was a story of young love, but it was portrayed in a very mature relationship, in my opinion, even though both of the leads were only 14. It's not like I related to the relationship, but for me, it was a mature relationship, which I have to give them props for, because it was great how they supported each other. The film also to me, had touches of magic, but it wasn't like a full-blown fantasy story. The girl was dealing with her first crush, but also navigating some serious decisions, at least to her, of what her future was going to look like. The synopsis did say that she wanted to be a writer and she's a poet, and so she was dealing with what she wanted to do with those passions of hers. And due to her being a writer and a poet, some of the scenes in the movie we saw were her imagination, especially when it came to her writing a story about the Baron, the cat statue. And that played out. Like, they actually did colorful scenes of her imagining the Baron and traveling with the Baron. I thought that was really nice and added this sort of fantasy whimsy element to the film, while the rest was just your normal slice of life story. The animation in this film didn't have a lack of color or anything, but the imagination scenes somehow added more color to the movie. And maybe it was because it did seem magical and wild and whimsical. But I love the animation style in this, especially during her imagination scenes. Also, the views of Tokyo from the male lead's house were gorgeous to look at, even if it was an animation. And as I said, I thought the lead couple had great chemistry. I love that they admired each other. I love that they supported each other. The male lead announced that he had to go away for 2 months to pursue this passion he wanted to do and this potential career he wanted to do. And even though she was sad because she wanted to get to know him more, and felt like he was ahead in life than her, even though they're both 14, something you should not be thinking about when you're 14. She supported that decision. She was like, "Oh, cool, that's awesome. Like, you should totally do that. I love that you are pursuing this passion of yours. I'm gonna do the same while you're gone." And they kind of pushed each other. She pushed herself because he was already there pursuing this dream, but when he got back, he kind of pushed her and supported her in that way as well. It was sort of like it was inspiring to me to have this young love supporting each other and admiring each other and just enjoying listening about each other's passions and interests. I love the themes of this film though. And the themes I kind of picked up on were creativity because both of these people, both of the leads, their passions were creative. She wanted to do writing and poetry and he wanted to build violins. He played violin as well. Another theme was growth or self-discovery and then independence, all within the themes of this movie. Now, I will say the music was an interesting choice for me. It was very unexpected because the movie starts and you get this. The opening song was Take Me Home Country Roads, performed by Olivia Newton-John. I don't know why they chose this song, and I tried to Google it to figure that out, and I couldn't find anything. I don't really know if I liked this musical choice, really. It was just very unexpected. And also, the ending seemed a little rushed to me. I wanted more than just the confession. Granted, the leads were in middle school, and it was cute. The confession was cute at the end, but they were also in middle school. Like, a lot of things could happen between then and when they were adults. So it kind of made no sense to have a confession, at least a confession the way it went off in this movie. I'm not going to spoil anything because I actually started laughing with how abrupt it was. It was still cute, but I thought the ending was a little rushed and I was not expecting a confession at the end. But I rate this a 9 out of 10. I am pleasantly surprised by Whispers of the Heart. I really did not think I was going to like it as much as I did, but 9 out of 10 because I thought it was very well done and I really enjoyed having a more whimsical movie to watch compared to the other ones that I was watching, especially like because of the other quote unquote whimsical movies or magical movies I watched had a lot more serious tone to them. This one was on more of the lighter side, which is, I guess, what I needed at the time I watched this. Since it's already April, and I already say that I'm probably not going to watch all these movies in 2025, I will work to watch all of them. And so you'll get mini reviews until I've watched all of them. Look forward to that. You'll definitely at least get one other episode this year, maybe two, of Studio Ghibli movies. And of course, as I said, I'll do an episode next year of ranking all of them, in my opinion. And maybe I'll bring somebody on to rank them as well. But I'm really glad. I'm always been a fan of Studio Ghibli and I'm really going to have access to everything now. And I also am really glad I'm finally going to be able to watch all of them because I do love these movies. And I think they're really, like, in my opinion, it's a really good introduction to Japanese content, depending on the movie. Studio Ghibli was one of the first things I ever watched as a kid. And I really think some of these movies are a good introduction to Japan and to the content you can get out of Japan. And who doesn't love a Studio Ghibli movie? So I really just wanted to take an opportunity to review these and to talk about them, and then finally be able to watch every one because, again, I haven't seen every single one of these movies. There's like 22, I think. Anyway, those were my reviews of the Studio Ghibli films that I watched, the first 5. Have you watched any Studio Ghibli films? What do you think of them? Are you a fan of Studio Ghibli films? Please let me know if you have watched any of these 5 movies. I will quickly run through them in my rating just to remind you. So I watched Only Yesterday, which I rated a 7 out of 10. Porco Rosso, which I rated a 9 out of 10. Ocean Waves, I rated a 3 out of 10. Pompoko, I rated a 9 out of 10. And Whispers of the Heart, I rated a 9 out of 10. Pretty good. Not like all 5 I loved, but that's okay for me. I'm okay with that. So let me know what you think of this episode. Let me know what you think of my reviews. Let me know what you think of Studio Ghibli. Comment, message me, whatever you'd like. And thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast. I will talk to you next week. Bye. If you want to continue the conversations about dramas that were started in this episode, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky under the username No Sleep for Dramas. That is No Sleep, the number 4 dramas, just like in the title of the podcast. This podcast is also an expansion of my blog, so you can visit my blog at www.nosleepfordramas.com, the number 4 dramas.com, and find multiple years of blog posts already available at your fingertips. all links are in the description of this episode. Finally, please give this podcast a like or a follow wherever you listen to the podcast. Leaving a comment or a review also helps a lot. We love hearing ideas and feedback from all of you. Share the podcast with your friends as well. Thank you for listening. This has been an episode of the No Sleep for Dramas podcast, and I am your host, Caitlin. I will see you here next time, and I hope you get no sleep chasing the next episode just like me. Good night.